Michael Lehman, and welcome to this episode of Behind the Curtain, tips, tricks, and insights into patterns and practices here at Microsoft. Today I've got Eugenio Pace with me, who's a program manager who's focused on cloud computing, Windows, Azure, and Windows Phone. So I know you guys just released some things regarding the cloud computing in Azure. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've been working for the last 8 months or so on 2 new guides for Windows Azure development. One is it's called the Moving Applications to the Cloud, and it's mostly focused on brownfield scenarios. So moving an existing application into the cloud, to Microsoft Cloud. And then there's a second book that we've been working on, and that's developing applications for Windows Azure, and that's mostly focused on greenfield scenarios.
Okay, scenarios where you don't have any code to start with, you're just going to build a new application targeted specifically at the cloud.
Exactly. So you don't have any pre-existing like constraints or legacy or anything that restricts you on what you can use and what you cannot use, right?
Okay, that makes sense. And the brownfield scenarios are for people that have existing ASP.NET applications?
Right. Exactly.
All right.
So in those situations where you already have an application, you've been working in a specific way with the existing tools, and what we talk about is what are the things that you are likely to encounter when you try to host that application in Windows Azure, right?
Right, because there's a whole set of different things that because of the fact that the application can move from server to server, and then you've got SQL Azure to potentially get involved with it. So how do you go about something like that? My understanding is you sort of created a fictitious company and a fictitious product to kind of make it more real than just here's an application and whatever. So did you actually build the original application for ASP.NET and then port it?
Right. So we essentially built a very simple, like a canonical line of business app, which is an expense report system. Everyone working for a corporation like ours probably is a user of one of those. So it's a pretty boring app, right? There's nothing interesting in the app itself. But again, the application is just an excuse for us to talk about all the considerations when you move an application like that to Windows Azure platform, right? So there's data considerations, there's authentication considerations, there's the way you run and you operate the app that change a little bit. It is not really very hard. When there's no like a single thing that you would say, oh, this you need to change everything or completely change the way you think about building apps. But there's details here and there that it is important to be aware of.
Right, and sometimes you have to build something real in order to be able to discover those.
Yeah, so we build this, this expense report system is very functionally incomplete, but it has all the pieces to make it as close as possible to the real world.
Right. And then for the greenfield scenario, you built something different, right?
Yes, so for the second guide, which is the greenfield app, it's a surveys application. So it's an online surveys app, and it's rather than being like the line of business scenario, it's more like an ISV, building a service. So building an application that it's sold as a service, right? Software as a service.
Okay.
It is running in Windows Azure, and it's the business model there is slightly different, right? Because what you buy is a subscription, which is a right to use the app for a period of time or for a certain number of people, etc. Right? So it's a multi-tenant application. It's hosted in Windows Azure, and it's a surveys application. So people can go, subscribers can go, edit, create a new survey, customize it, and then publish it for people to take.
Right. And then as you moved on to the phone, you leveraged that survey application as well. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Exactly. So the Windows Phone project, it's almost like a natural extension to the Tailspin surveys, to the Windows Azure Service app. Because what we're building essentially is like a phone, it's a mobile experience on the same service.
Okay.
Right? So what it allows you to do, it's to enter surveys in your phone and then submit the responses back to the server's app, right?
So it's not creating the surveys; it's actually just responding to the surveys as you would as a consumer.
And again, all this is just an excuse for us to talk about interesting technical, challenges. So in our case, we're using the device, the phone. It's almost like with all the sensors and all the input capabilities that we have photo, we can take a picture, you can record voice, you can use the GPS to identify where you are. So all of that becomes the answers for a specific survey, right? And so it's an excuse to make the most of what the platform offers.
Well, that sounds great. So the code for these things is hosted on Codeplex, right?
Some of this is, all of this is in Codeplex. In some cases, it's already on MSDN because it's a published, released deliverable.
Right.
In some cases, most of these will be books. So, these are books that you can buy eventually.
Right.
But all of them are in Codeplex as well. So people who want to participate or want to tell us about things that you would like to see that are different from what is in there. It's one of the channels that we use to grab as much feedback as possible. It's Codeplex, so we monitor them very actively.
All right, and then we have the PMP Symposium coming up in October, and you guys are going to be talking about it, you and Scott Densmore, right?
Yes, exactly. So we have, Scott and I, we have 2 sessions. One session is in Windows Azure design, and it's primarily on building applications for Windows Azure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second session is about the phone, right? So it's it's mostly talking about the specific things about building a Windows Phone app. Right?
All right, that sounds excellent. So any idea what's beyond this?
Well, our backlog is long, and people keep telling us that they want to see more things. And one of the exciting things about the Windows Azure platform in general, Windows Phone too, but Windows Azure in particular, is that because it's a service, right? Mm-hmm. It gets updated very, very frequently compared to other platforms that we have shipped in the past. So it means that it keeps us busy pretty much month by month, right? So we have a long line of things that we want to focus on, as things like Dallas, things like the Windows Azure App Fabric, just to name 2 things that are in our radar. Right?
Okay, and the best way for people to get involved in that conversation is to go through the Codeplex site?
They can reach us through Codeplex. Mm-hmm. They can reach us through direct contact. Our blogs are public, our Twitter accounts are public, so we very much welcome anyone with good ideas or some suggestions of what we need to do differently. All of them are very, very much welcome.
All right, well that sounds great. Okay, and that's it for this week's Behind the Curtain, tips, tricks, and insights into patterns and practices at Microsoft. Thanks, Eugenio.
Thank you. Very good. Thanks.